Hi all, we're going to look now at Gata Kamsky versus Ivanchuk in round 4 of the Linares 1991 tournament, in which Ivanchuk scored half a point higher than Kasparov in this event. So, e4 was played by Gata Kamsky, who by the way is the current highest rated player on the FIDE rating list, at about 2730 FIDE. At the time he was only 2640, and Ivanchuk was higher rated at 2695. Anyway, so Ivanchuk plays e5, and we go into a Ruy Lopez here. And the particular variation of the Ruy Lopez, which Gata Kamsky allows by playing c3 now, is the Marshall Gambit, named after the old champion Frank Marshall, who launched this gambit in his famous game against Gilles Rule Capablanca. Capablanca managed to win that game, but the gambit has stood the test of time as being quite reliable and very dangerous. It gives black a lot of dynamic pressure onto white's king side. But we see in this game that the gambit is also pressure potentially on the queen side. And considering Ivanchuk's round 1 game where he dominated Kasparov on both the queen side and king side, we kind of get a repeat here, but with the black pieces. We'll watch how Kamsky gets squeezed on both sides of the board, just like Kasparov was. So d4, and now bishop d6, this is all theory, but now rook e2 is slightly rarer, I believe, than rook e1. Ivanchuk now plays bishop g4, so not the standard queen h4. This may be all theory as well. After f3, bishop h5. Now one of the points of this bishop to h5 is that black is actually going to move this f pawn, and the bishop can nicely retreat to f7 later, as we'll see. Kamsky takes on d5, trying to consolidate his pawn up with some simplification, and after knight d2, now Ivanchuk plays f5. So we see now queen b3, and now bishop f7. Now believe it or not, the engine Rybka thinks black is virtually equal here already, even though a pawn down. After knight f1, Ivanchuk now plays f4, and watch that knight, it's been restricted, and this bishop is also hemmed in by that advanced pawn on f4. So black already has a sort of cramp with this pawn on the king side, and white's pawns on the queen side are not very mobile either. So we'll see now the queen side work, which Ivanchuk does as well. Bishop d2, queen d7. So that's reinforcing pressure on this diagonal. So if this rook ever moves, then a4 is going to be just sacrificing a pawn. The rook did move now. And now Ivanchuk played a5. So instead of the classical play on the king side, where white's very solid, Ivanchuk plays where he's got a kind of potential to squeeze Kamsky on the queen side. So a3, and after a4, we see white's pawns becoming more fixed. White really wouldn't want to play now b3 or b4 without damaging the pawn structure, leaving isolated pawns here and here on a. So already white is getting cramped now on the queen side as well as the king side. It's these two pawns in particular which are the cramping pawns. Bishop g6, and Rybka thinks black is actually better here. So just by playing positionally, the gambit has been justified with the pressure being exerted on the white position, and this knight on f1 being very passive. Bishop c1, now rook f7. So we have here some interesting moves which show that white may be wanting to get the knight to g4 now. Ivanchuk's not afraid to play h5 though, stopping that knight from coming out. So white's very tied down still. And Ivanchuk's like playing some waiting moves here, which are actually quite difficult to explain. Because actually here, the rook doesn't go to g6. Maybe in a club chess sort of attack, you expect rook g6 here now, to do something with this rook. But actually, Ivanchuk just plays king h8. But really, that is really no attack. Let's have a quick look. White could just play king h1, and perhaps there's really no way easily of continuing that attack. So instead, the emphasis is much on positional play. This rook comes back to c8 now, because white's just played b3. Now bishop b2, and now king h7. After knight f1, rook f8. So we see the versatility of these rooks coming back to now, scurrying back to the queen side. No kingside attack in this game. And in fact they double now to put pressure on white's c-pawn, which seems at the moment academic, but with the aid of a lovely pawn sacrifice now, b4, black is blasting through some lines on the queen side. A takes b4, a3. So now bishop takes a3 was played. Let's have a very quick look at bishop a1. If bishop a1, trying to hold things up, then Rybka actually gives the stunning exchange sacrifice. Rook takes c3. Let's have a look. Bishop takes c3, rook takes c3. And the danger for white now is this very dangerous passed pawn here on a3. So maybe this is one of the main points. For example, rook a2, queen a7, and also d4 is under fire, as well as black supporting the a pawn. And let's say king h1, bishop takes b4. Black's got plenty of compensation here. According to Rybka, nearly 0.7, so it's nearly a pawn worth of compensation, or pawn up. So bishop a1 wasn't played though. Bishop takes a3 was played. So Ivanchuk crashes through now on the queen side. So we see the rook infiltration. And the rooks are really, really active now. And he doesn't mind this exchange of rooks here. Now here perhaps is a blunder according to Rybka. Ivanchuk played bishop g6. But actually there's a stunning rook takes f3 here. Because if queen e2, then black has rook takes h3 check. With the idea that if g takes h3, then f3 check, unleashing a discovered check on white's king, winning the queen. So maybe Ivanchuk had an improvement here with rook takes f3. Instead he played bishop g6. Now queen f2, and he carries on the queen side, bishop takes b4. So after rook e5, rook d1. Now there's a very nice plan which he formulates here to establish more advantage. After rook b1, rook g5, white's rook starting to be misplaced. But note this pressure being exerted by this rook on the queen side. It's very annoying. But to intensify that pressure, Ivanchuk now proceeds to remove this defensive queen. So he comes up with queen c6 with the idea of infiltrating with queen c2. Because if these queens come off, this rook's going to start mopping things up. Rook e5 was played, now queen c2. And now in desperation, or rather the only seemingly good move, rook takes h5 check. Bishop takes h5 obviously loses the queen. But Ivanchuk's forced to play a good but only move, king g8. And after queen e6 check, bishop f7. But these checks are harmless. This deflection is harmless. Rook h8 check, just takes. And after queen takes f7, just queen c6. And white's still in terrible trouble because of this invasive rook, putting this double attack on both these pieces. White plays bishop c3, and after bishop takes c3, queen f8 check. But the checks are harmless, and after queen f5 check, queen g6 protects the rook on b1. White's had enough. White resigns. Let's have a quick overview and summary. So it was a Ruy Lopez Marshall Gambit variation, but a Marshall Gambit with a difference. Pressure on both sides of the board. The lovely pawn on f4 restricted white's knight and pieces generally, but then we saw queen side expansion and this a4 pawn cramping white on the queen side. Then we saw some waiting moves. These rooks apparently going to swing for an attack, but they didn't. They kept their flexibility. And once white played b3, we saw black building up force on the c3 pawn now. And now b4 pawn sacrifice to break through on the queen side. Followed by a3. After bishop takes a3, now we see a terribly invasive rook emerging. There was an improvement here potentially with rook takes f3, but that was missed. Instead, bishop g6. But even so, White worsened his position perhaps with this rook excursion, because that black rook was extremely dangerous, especially after this idea to exchange off queens. So white, leaving white defenceless against this pressure from this rook on b1. These checks, although seemingly quite scary, were easily parable now with this nice move queen c6. So if the king gets to h7, queen g6 is going to be a defence. So queen c6 was a lovely defensive move. Bishop c3 seems just a desperate move before resignation. And after this, in the final position, white resigned. Queen g6 defends everything. So I hope you enjoyed that game for round 4. So Chucky, as he's nicknamed, continued in his quest to win first prize in this Linares 1991 tournament. Thanks very much, and see you on YouTube.